Hello, everyone. This is your stacking demonstration. So I have my pieces that I made in class yesterday. They are pretty leather hard. Some of the ones that still have bottoms are a little bit wet, but I'm gonna go ahead and work with them anyway. So first thing, I'm just gonna kind of play around, right? So, what do things look like when they're all stacked up? How does that look? That's not terrible, but there are a lot of visible seams. And so what might I do with those to either not necessarily hide them? I talked about that yesterday. That's not always the right solution, but how do I, make it look integrated? So that was an okay combo. This might not work, but always try it. That's interesting, a little bit more diverse in the ins and outs, but I probably would still do something about this seam right here. And what I mean by do something, I might try to hide it and blend it, but I also could use it and kind of push it up and make it into a different element there that doesn't compete with all of these other horizontal lines. Is it okay to have horizontal lines? Of course. And what I was talking about yesterday during the demonstration also was, I can always add a bottom too. Like, what if I did something like this? And that all worked out, which it doesn't quite, and it doesn't really look that great. But, I can always make a bottom. If all of a sudden I'm like, you know what, I really want this to be the bottom. You can just kind of pat out a slab of clay and you can scratch and attach it on. We haven't talked about scratching and attaching, but we're going to as soon as I figure out what arrangement I'm ready to go with. Definitely no. This is just these two, which is, again, it's okay. It's not the best form. I think that was the first one kind of that I was thinking about. Right, and again, I was talking about kind of having this part right here is a little bit awkward. This just by itself, kind of okay, but not even close to 9 inches. So let's see, is it that one? Too bad we didn't have a polling system. Is it that way? No. I know it was this one in the middle, so I guess we're gonna go with this. And if you don't like this form, well, you'll be so excited when you get to make your own. Okay, so what I want to do now that I've got my, and I know what's going where, I'm going to go ahead and put these over here. And I am going to, if I can trim this, so I might as well go ahead, or I could, dome it in so that it has its own foot, but I like using tools, so I'm going to do that really quick. Recognizing that there is not a lot of clay there to begin with. It's going to be a very shallow foot. But I could also refine the outside edge of this foot a little bit more since I have the opportunity. And yes, it is a bit uneven, and that is probably the result of making these off the hump. So it might have been a good choice to use the wheel instead of just dunting in the bottom. Now I can also take a minute here and just kind of make sure that this rim is round. For the most part, it's got a little bit of a jump, but that's okay. Okay, so now I want to clean up this area and it's actually very uneven. Again, from throwing off the hump. So if you are throwing off the hump, you know, pay more attention than I did. I was talking and doing my thing when I was doing this. And so if I had been paying more attention, I would have set the foot down farther and not have had that issue. Now, this tool can work for this, but this is a better tool. So it's a metal U with a wire, you know, with a wire across. And it works well because I can just really slowly start to take off that inside edge. And that wire is so thin that it cuts that clay away very easily. These are located in the hand building room in those yellow buckets kind of near the door. Okay, so the most of that's gone now. Get rid of that off my wheel. Center. You can also see that this got really warped when I took it off. So I'll try and fix that also. All right. Now this is tricky. This is that thing that I tell you never to do with your feet once they've, once your foot ring has been established. I'm just cleaning up the inside a little bit more. But you can see that this is definitely unlevel. If I use this on this surface, that makes me nervous because I know that my hand will jump. But for some of you, you know, some of you that may work. I don't know. I don't trust myself that much. So as I'm working on this very small edge that I want to get level, I'm really using my hands to stabilize my tool. And I was able to do that pretty quickly and efficiently. Okay, so I leveled it off by using the wheel and trimming the parts down. If you get excited about this and you want to make more than 2 of your pieces taller than 9 inches or 9 inches or taller, then please feel free to do so. So it's much easier. It'll be much easier for me to work with now. Let's see how it looks. I can't remember if I had it this way or the other way. Sorry. I don't think that was this way. No, okay. So these 2 pieces are now ready to go. Okay. And rather than working on the 3rd piece, I'm going to go ahead and join these together. So what you need to join clay is you need slip. That is the same type of clay that you use. So I'm using the red stoneware. So what I did was I went over to the red reclaim bucket and I got some kind of dried trimmings and some mush from there. And I stirred it around with a brush until it's kind of a, you know, kind of a thick yogurt consistency, and chunks are fine. Okay, so I'm gonna center this back on here, right side up. And then I'm gonna pop this one on. And just take a look. It definitely does not look quite as centered, right? I think it got a little warped here in the middle too, so it might not be totally, I don't want to say perfect. We don't like to say, use that term here, but it's going to be hard for it to kind of all look centered while the wheel's spinning. But, you know, most people don't have wheels in their houses, so they won't be able to see that. I'm just kidding. So to attach parts, you want to scratch and attach. So you want to use your pin tool and make these really kind of deep hatch marks. So you want to go in 2 different directions. That's what a hatch mark is. Hash mark. You know, right? Hash mark. Hashtag, same idea. It's just a bajillion of them all over the surface of the clay that you want to join. Jam into a little David Bowie over here, if you can hear my music all. And then I am going to put a little bit of slip on there. If it's not really painting on, you can always add a little bit more. You kind of want it. You don't want to have to leave a ton of glob. And then I'm going to go ahead and rough up that surface one more time. And so what this does is instead of the clay joining like this, whoa, sorry, like this, it's joining like this, which is a much stronger bond. Do not forget this part, and do not do not underscore. I don't mean underscore. Don't make sure that your score marks are really prominent. If they're really light like this, it's not going to do a whole lot. Okay, you should see burrs. You should be feeling the resistance of the clay as your pin tool bites into it. And now I'm going the other way. So with scratching like that on both surfaces and slip on both surfaces, again, you don't need to overdo the slip. It should kind of squeeze out a little bit when you attach the two parts. But if it's like so thick that it's dripping and you got drips coming down your piece, you probably used a little bit too much slip. My slip's a little thick because it was sitting out for a couple days, so just adding a little bit of water to it. Okay, and again, going back over that. Pause this for just a minute. Okay, now we're gonna put this on here. And I'm not gonna push it down yet. I'm going to kind of see where this is all wonky. It's mostly wonky actually down here in that middle part. Which if you fix one part, another part's gonna get wonky. So like I said, it's never gonna be perfectly centered from top to bottom, but I can get it pretty darn close. So I'm looking at this seam here. Part of the unevenness is that it might not have been placed, down like at this placed level. Now this looks a little bit better. This connection looks a little ick, but again, I can work with that. So I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to give it kind of a push. And then I'm going to use my sponge on the outside, my finger on the inside. And I'm kind of pushing on that seam from both sides. And so in this instance, I am trying to hide that seam. And this is one way of doing it, where it's not necessarily going to look like you tried to smooth the two parts together. Okay, so I have those two parts together now. Let's see if I can help out this top any bit. Okay, so I have this area right here that I don't really like. Again, it's the connection. There's not really anything great going on there. Like it kind of, it's just hanging out in this middle ground of not being smooth or together and not being different or too different. So I am actually trying to kind of rethrow this clay. Not in water, but I'm just basically going over that seam again, compressing it with my fingers. And in doing so, it's made this form look a little bit more unified. And I'm actually going to go ahead and use this, my metal rib. I'm just trying to move on this side so you can see. Now, this is going to work if you catch your pieces at a, soft leather hard. You can still kind of move that clay around a little bit. So that to me looks a little bit more unified. I'm still not loving it, but maybe by the time I get my top piece on, it'll look a little bit better. Now, I'm gonna take this off. I chuckle because I could have thrown that in one piece, but that's okay. The whole point was to show y'all how to work with pieces. So I don't want this. So I'm gonna trim that part out. Gotta take a look, feel how thick my wall is here. So for all of you who have gone through the bottoms of your pieces, now this is your opportunity to do that on purpose. This can be done a couple of ways. I usually like to do it with my pin tool because that's the quickest for that bottom to drop out. So you always want to start the wheel before using a pin tool. So start the wheel, make sure your hands are, that you've got a good hold on your tool and that your hands are supporting each other. And you just kind of push that pin tool down until you're through. And if it's hard for you to tell, or if you're like, it doesn't seem to be going through, just, you can always stop the wheel and push, right? And eventually it'll go through. So I'm pretty close. There, okay. Once it starts to come off, it's best to just pull it out. Otherwise it makes a mess. And then you can go back to using this a little bit if that was helpful for you, or you can just use your regular trimming tools. I can't quite get to the spot that I want to with that tool, so I am going to use a different tool. And again, I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that this surface is level. I am using the small round side of my small trimming tool. Not really for any reason other than it takes off less than the flat one. And I feel like I have more control. So that's kind of might be a preference thing. So if you're using one side of it and you don't really like the way that or it feels like it's biting in too much, then go ahead and use the other side of the tool. Okay, so might as well go ahead and scratch this since it's right here. And this is wetter than the rest because, frankly, it had clay keeping the moisture in, whereas the top was open and had more exposure to air. And this is gonna be a tall, narrow shape, but it, you know, the stacking doesn't have to be tall and narrow all the time. There's a lot of great forms that have something that's really wide, like you can almost, you could throw two bowls that have the same diameter. And have like a, you know, kind of a domed bowl shape and then put a straight cylinder on top. There's a lot of great forms you can get by combining smaller pieces. And some of you may enjoy that process just in and of itself. Kind of you might feel like it gives you a little bit of freedom. And some of you might just be excited because it allows you to make taller things when maybe you don't have, you know, you just aren't really able to make things out of a lot of clay. Like I said, I even struggled the other day when I was making my forms. And I made the, you know, that mistake of trying to start with too much clay. For a 9-inch piece, depending on how wide it is, you know, I'd start with like maybe 3 pounds of clay. And that might be too much. So you don't have to all of a sudden jump to 7 pounds to get 9 inches. Whenever you are assembling, do it at a wheel. You want to use the advantage of getting something centered on the wheel as opposed to trying to align pieces together freehand. And this. It's actually pretty good there. The top is a little oblong. Squeeze that. Okay. Not a terrible form, not the best thing I've ever made, you know, but again, you kind of will learn what shapes go well together if you do a lot of this. You all are just doing this, you know, once or a few times, so don't expect perfection. But whoopsies, when that happens, make sure that you grab your pot. But now I've got 9 inches. You know. And with a really nice glaze job, it could be a really lovely gift or something that you sell at the sale or all kinds of things. So now that I've got everything kind of together, I still need to work on this seam a little bit. I should only use tools that you have. Okay, so I remember I used the metal rib here. So again, I'm trying to kind of push that softer clay. That's the result of scratching and attaching. So I'm pushing on the inside, right on the seam, into my rib here to clean up and then also to compress and strengthen that seam. And if I can get the clay a little bit moist, I might be able to change the shape just a little bit. Again, maybe just kind of refine things. So you can trim the outside, you can use these tools. This is kind of the biggest problem area down here where it's a little dry. It's the top of the rim. I'm probably not gonna be able to get it soft again. But so I'm using my trimming tool on the outside of the form, which is something that I haven't shown you how to do. And when you're stacking, you know, this kind of makes a lot of sense because if you want to stack and hide those seams, then this is how you do it. Now, let's say your connections really just are very prominent and there's no hiding the seam, okay? So let's pretend like this was a seam right here. You know, it's totally fine to have that kind of detail. Or let's say, you know what, maybe I do still want this one here. Can I bring that back in? What tool can I use? So. Again, anytime you're working on the clay, you gotta have your hand on the inside, you gotta have your hand on the outside. You know, or do something totally different around that seam to give it, you know, a different texture. So there's lots of different ways to deal with the seams so that again, they look integrated, that they do look integrated with the form and not kind of a byproduct of stacking things together, okay? So that is the goal. If you're gonna be stacking, you want the pieces to look integrated. And you know, kind of by whatever creative means you get that done is totally fine and up to you. Needs a little bit more attention here. So I wasn't able to, this clay right here is a little dry. And so I wasn't able to get as prominent of an indentation there. So I'm using my small trimming tool to kind of fake that. Fake it till you make it. So now I have this detail here in the middle, which is a little oddballish. Again, so what am I gonna do maybe down here to pull these things back together? So maybe what I'll try and do is make this type of detail a little bit more prominent down here. Right, so again, if you haven't really started using your tools or seeing what they can do, you know, they can be used at any stage. They are used differently at different stages though, but you know, it's a good idea to play around with them. It can really help to take your pieces from something that like look okay to something that look really well crafted and intentional. All right, so that is the stacked vessel. Okay, should be good enough to be able to turn upside down. I've got my little foot on there. All right, and that is the end of this demonstration. Good luck, and you will be absolutely fine. Just play.